checking in from Diamond Peak Ski Resort, Lake Tahoe. Snowboarding, which has been fun. I skied back a long time ago, maybe 1993 or so it's been a minute. And I just thought I'd give snowboarding a shot. My buddy Larry is here as well. And so far it's been fun, but clearly, much like the case was in 2008 when I started playing poker, lots of work to do. Anyway, that's not why you're here. Let's jump back into some $0, $5, no limit hold'em action at Peppermill. So I make the trip from Diamond Peak back down Mount Rose Highway to Reno and get to the Peppermill at about 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon to find 3 $5 no limit hold'em games going on. So I jump into the game and the first hand comes when my buddy Reno Grinder straddles 10 under the gun, and I have pocket jacks +1. I make it 30. A very loose player on the button makes the call, and then the straddler makes it 150. Having known him for years, I think that I'm at best a coin flip here, and I also don't want to get stuck big right out of the gate against the last guy at the table that I want to give action to. And if you watched the last vlog, you know that lesson is still very fresh in my mind. So I make the fold, as does the button. Next hand involves the same 3 players, but as you can imagine, I successfully flip-flopped the 2 that are really involved. When +3 opens to 20, and the low jack calls, I have ace-king in the hijack, and make it 75. This time, I do get heads up with the right guy. So with 175 in, the flop is 7-4-7 with 2 diamonds. He checks, and I check it back, thinking all of his pairs will call me here, and I'm beating all of his non-pairs, obviously. The turn comes an ace. He checks, and I figure my hand will look so incredibly face-up if I bet big here that I should really try to bet small. So I make it 25, and he calls. So with 225 in, the river is the 4 of hearts, and he checks. Now I bet 75 here, thinking that if he has an ace, he'd have raised the turn, knowing how he plays over many years. He ends up calling pretty quickly here, so we have a $375 pot. We show, and he mucks. I heard him saying something about having pocket kings there, which wouldn't shock me that he might try to slow play them in a bizarre way. Then we get a $10 button straddle on my right, and a $45 raise from an aggressive player under the gun 2. The cutoff, another action player calls. I look at pocket 7s in the big blind, and I call. So with 145 in, the flop comes king 9-7 rainbow, giving me bottom set. I check, +2 checks, and the button bets 75. I elect to smooth call this raise for 2 reasons. 1, +2 could check raise bluff here, and 2, the cutoff had been losing and was likely to jam all in on the turn. So I call, as does +2 to my surprise. So with 370 in, the turn is a 10, and I gave this some thought, but eventually decided my best choice was to let one of these 2 guys bet. Whatever the outcome of this hand was going to be, I'd already achieved my goal of getting into a big hand with a big hand against these 2 exact guys. Anyway, I check, +2 checks, and the cutoff jams all in, just as I thought he might. It's a $335 bet. Obviously, I call +2 fold, so we have a $1,040 pot. And he says, good call. He does not want to show. We do not make him show. We only do that with pros. We take down a very nice pot. Then, a king gets exposed pre-flop. And we get a limp under the gun 1. And I pick up ace-queen of clubs in the low jack and raise to 25. He ends up limp calling. So with 55 in, it comes queen 4 deuce with 2 spades, and he leads right out for 40. I'm definitely going to raise here. I make it 125, and he calls, as I figured he would. So with 305 in, the turn's the jack of clubs, and he checks. I settle on a sizing of $150 here, and he ends up thinking about it for a second and then check calling. So with 605 in, the river is an offsuit 8, and he checks again. Now, I got to admit, if that king had not been exposed, I think I would have value bet this river, putting him on king-queen a lot. But he's been known to trap And if you missed a flush draw, obviously you can't call anyway. So eventually I decided just to play this one safe. Not a very Ben Deach way to do it, but I check it back, and he shows ace-jack of spades, a hand I definitely should have thought about, and one that he could have considered paying off a small river bet too. So I miss out on some value there, but either way, we're cruising along at this point. Then I pick up ace-10 of spades, and I call a $20 raise from the cutoff, going 4 ways to ace-10-4, 2 diamonds. +1 and 2 check, and the low jack makes it 50. I raise to 125, and now +1, a tight player, cold calls me, which was definitely a concern. And the low jack completes, which I obviously assumed he would. So with 460 in, the turn is the 3 of clubs, and I bet $275. The guy that I wanted to see fold does. Unfortunately, the guy that I wanted to see call doesn't. So both guys go out, and we take that one down without a showdown. Then I open 20 under the gun with queens and get 3-bet by the same player, who this time is on the button. He's the same guy who I busted with the pocket 7s earlier. He makes it 100, and obviously I'm not going to fold here. I make the call with 205 in. The flop is slightly above average, coming queen 10-10 with 2 clubs, and I check. Sure enough, much to my delight, he decides to jam all in, this time for about $270. The turn is the jack of diamonds, and the river is the ace of diamonds. But we still win with that run out. He shows 1 ace. And at this point, we're basically in beast mode. But that came to an end when I lost with a jack high flush to a king high flush and a flush over flush over flush pot that was somehow only a $600 pot, as the board was paired and the guy with the king high flush is terrible at getting max value out of his hands. Then we get a hand with the same villain. $15 straddle is on to my left, and I have aces. So I had to figure out how much to raise here. Kind of tricky. I decided on a bet size of $35. The straddle, who I was hoping would call, doesn't. But the button, who had just won that big pot with the king high flush, calls. By the way, pay close attention to how much wider people will call you after they win a pot off of you. It's amazing. It's like they just assume that because they beat you once, that you're just going to spew your entire stack off to them. Big leak a lot of people have. Anyway, with $85 in, it comes 9-6 deuce with 2 clubs. I bet $75 here, which in hindsight probably wasn't big enough, but he makes the call. And with 235 in, the turn is a 4, and I bet 150. He thinks about it for a second, but not too long, and decides to call. So with 535 in, the river is the 7 of clubs. Now, this is tricky. I don't see how I can check call, because he's a calling station, not a guy who bluffs. Therefore, if he bets, I'm always going to be beat. But he will still call me with a lot of hands. So it becomes, as I've said before, a quintessential bet fold spot. I make it 165, just a little bit more than I bet on the turn, because it'll really throw people off sometimes when you bet less on the river than you bet on the turn. And I didn't want to have anything truly weird happen, so I make that sizing, and he calls. So once he does, I feel very confident of the fact that I'm going to win this pot, which is worth $865. I show my aces, and he shows Jack 8 of clubs for the rivered flush. Remember when I said he's not very good at getting value out of his hands once he hits them, but on this day, he was very good at hitting them, particularly against me. And he wasn't even done there, because I didn't get video of it, but I'm not kidding. This same dude played another big pot against me. I flopped a set against him, and he beat me with the turned flush, a king high flush at that, but once again, did not get max value out of it. But still, I lose several hundred more in the hand, and after losing a few more small pots, I found myself in a terrible situation, where after being up 1,500, I was barely up much at all. That is easily the most disappointing winning session I've ever had playing poker. I was up 1,500 at one point. Then I lose flush over flush over flush. Pocket aces lose to a flush, and my set loses to a flush, all of the same opponent. Now, fortunately for me, this guy's terrible, and he didn't get max value out of any of those hands. I then managed to lose 2 semi-smaller pots after that, flopping top pair in both of them. And then on my last hand, I lose about 400 to the same pro that I lost to last week when he outflopped my pocket kings this time. So that will wrap it up. Kind of the sad reality. That's how it can go sometimes. You know, on this vlog, I don't, just make myself try to look like a big winner every time. Sometimes you only end up a small winner when you should have been a big winner, and that's just how it goes.